Welcome back, everybody, to Can I Be Honest? We have a mix of things going on this week. We have the death of two very iconic and important individuals in C.T. Vivian and John Lewis. It's ironic because they were both jailed at the same time, and now they share entry to the next life at the same time. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Also, want to talk about multiple anti-Semitic comments that have come up, and just talk about that in general. And talk with we have a guest with us tonight that can give us some perspective from the Jewish point of view. We're really excited for that. DeSean, how are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling good, man, about the guests that we're going to have on. I mean, I get excited about having complicated, controversial conversations. I know that, a lot of people get real nervous and tend to shy away from them. I want to go some places that, people that do these type of discussions are afraid to go. I want to dive a little deeper and hopefully walk away from the conversation a little bit wiser and more enlightened. And hopefully some of the people that are viewing will be able to do the same. So I'm excited. Obviously, we have a lot to talk about today. We're going to get as much of it as we can in within the hour. And what we don't, hopefully we'll be able to save a little bit for next week, maybe. But I mean, obviously, there's no shortage of things to talk about. And Ralph, tell them why.
This is America.
I have a dream.
These are animals.
America preaches integration and practices segregation.
Why did you say Mexico?
A rising tide of discontent.
The South will rise again. I have a dream.
We have contrasting visions about what America is.
This is America.
So we want to welcome you if you're watching from Facebook or YouTube. We'd love to see you. Announce yourself in the comments. What are you thinking about what we're talking about tonight? What are your thoughts on what's going on? Where are you from? How are you? All that kind of stuff. We appreciate you joining us live. We would love for you to tell other people. We are going to show a snippet of some of the comments that Nick Cannon made. We're going to show some of the quote that DeSean Jackson had tweeted out, and we're just looking forward to the conversation. Really looking forward to talking tonight with our guest. So if you're joining us, we'd love to invite other people. Let's start out talking about these two iconic figures, guys who have been around in the trenches during the heat and the height of the Civil War, not the Civil War, but the Civil Rights Movement. DeSean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, obviously, mad respect. I'm a person that definitely respects people that put in work and are willing to sacrifice for what they believe in. And, both of them definitely fall in line with that. Left great examples of what it should look like if we're passionate about creating the type of country that we all want America to be, or either believe America to be. I guess for me, somebody that really believes in the nonviolence approach, I just believe that it's the way to go. I'm not somebody that's always has mastered practicing it on a personal level, but I do believe that it's the right route and the right pathway. I think, when I think about C.T. Vivian first, right? I think about the sacrifice and them being willing to put themselves in harm's way for what they believe in. And as somebody that would always get kind of frustrated when I'd hear people do the vote or die type of shaming. And part of the frustration would be that people would often say, look, people died for you to have the right to vote. Mm-hmm. But they would say that in a way that as if voting is honoring their sacrifice. And to me, I think we miss it if we stop there, right? But it's
so that's the end all of honoring it, right?
Exactly. That's the end all of honoring their commitment and their sacrifice. And for me, I'm no, you have to find something. If you really want to honor their sacrifice and their level of commitment, you have to find something that you're willing to risk your risk something for. Maybe it's not your life, but you have to be like find something that you are willing to fight. I think that's the way that we honor that type of legacy. So that's kind of like, C.T. Vivian didn't pay the ultimate price, but he definitely put himself in position to on a number of occasions. And I mean, Don Lewis, I mean, he's like well documented. Like it's amazing when you think about the plight. I mean, like the integrity and the dignity that he carried and conducted throughout his life and his career is amazing to me. For somebody to be able to be that strong and that disciplined in their conduct, yeah, I just, honor both of them. I thank God that we had both of them to kind of help, be somewhat of a moral compass and like figure out a way to have a strong, solid voice that would and find a way to have their voices heard. So we'll miss them. I think that I'm excited about the young folks that I see out there following.
Yeah, it's interesting timing, like as it relates to what you're talking about now, as far as like the baton and so on. The timing of it is very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm excited. I mean, I see, young folks that are willing to do what you saw them doing so many years ago. So I'm crazy enough to continue to have hope, in spite of these systems being very persistent, being very figuring out ways to evolve and morph and turn into something else to continue to oppress and whatnot. But those are my thoughts. What are yours?
Yeah, I definitely echo a lot of what you said. I think the consistency, anytime you have a major thing, John Lewis was there in the headlines, and it's interesting. They'll flash back and forth between his pictures of back in the day and his pictures now. His he looks the same, just older. He's a very, very distinct look. But I do think it's and like it is impressive. You think about some of the other people, like not even just in the civil rights movement, just period, that their lives are on display for that many decades, and to really have that consistency is impressive. And also, it's a challenge. I think it's a challenge from a lot of levels. From an integrity standpoint, it's a challenge from a just movement standpoint. Like, what are you about? When you look at, like, there is no questioning of legacy. And I think that's impressive. I think a lot of us, I think I sometimes, as someone who often thinks about legacy, can look and say sometimes just been too wishy-washy and too, what am I, if I were to go now, like what would my life be about? And not like the pretty things that people say at the funeral, but like in reality, like what kind of impact did I make? And I think when you look at those two gentlemen, it's unquestionable. And I think it is, especially in today's culture, we can be pretty flaky and, pretty, we have challenges keeping our attention on one thing. So I think that both of them are great examples. So, and their voices will be missed, but also like you said, I do hope that it's a real challenge to kind of spark the fire and to keep the fire under some of us, to keep moving, keep pushing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, with that, we'd love to hear, any comments that you guys have. Obviously, you can drop a comment. You also will have time to jump on later in the show. If you want to jump on, you just text the number. The Grouse just put up 313-473-0499. Text a comment, something that you want to share to that number. We'll get you the link and you can jump right on with us and join us. But we're going to dive into our next subject matter. One that, if you've been paying attention to the news media cycles at all, you've heard Nick Cannon, you've heard DeSean Jackson and their apologies. You may have heard their comments and their remarks. In the midst of like cancel culture, I think we touched on this a little bit last week and gave some of our thoughts on cancel culture, not knowing that we were going to have this conversation this week. But I think that, it's a necessary conversation. I'm excited to have it. I will, like the conversation we're getting ready to dive into, I'll admit that I have a lot to learn. I think that, the temptation is to tread very lightly when you're having these type of conversations and whatnot. So fortunate enough to have friends in different spaces, so that, because treading lightly is something that's like, I don't do well. Respectfully, I do that well, right? But like the fear of like somebody canceling me because I say the wrong thing or anything like that. Like I'm somebody that like it's very important to me to be able to walk freely, and I don't want to like be bound in any way, shape, or form. So the bondage of being scared that I'll say something somebody's going to post and say DeJuan's this or DeJuan's that, so he's going to be canceled. So I thank God for friendships, and you're going to hear from one of my friends who's going to be joining us on this conversation, so that if I trip, stumble, fall, instead of him canceling me, I hope that he'll pick me up and say, yo, like, don't say that. That was stupid, or that hurt, or that was offensive. You know what I mean? And then we can keep on moving. There's a lot of work to do in this regard. So, Steve, before we bring our guest on, do you want to share any of your thoughts about the conversation that we're getting ready to dive into?
I'm looking forward to it. I've been ingesting a lot of information from different places around this, as much as I've been able to over the weekend, and I am interested. You mentioned ignorance, and it's I think this is a very interesting conversation, and I've heard that term be used multiple times in the different conversations that I've heard about it. So I'm very interested also in looking at some of the outcomes or some of the commitments coming out of this. I think that's a key piece of it. And so it's and just throwing in the extra fun part of the cancel culture, and just I think this is a great one to jump into for that, and to really dissect when that's appropriate, when it's inappropriate, is it ever or is it always? I think this is a good case study. So I'm excited to talk with Paul.
Cool, that's good. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and invite our guest on. You're going to hear from Paul Black. He is the president and CEO of JVS Human Services. But on here, you're just going to hear some guys, and hopefully some women will chime in, just being folks that are trying to figure this stuff out. So Ralph, can you bring Paul on backstage? What's up, Paul?
What's happening, guys?
Hey, Paul.
Thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure. So I just got to say, I'm just a guy, though, right? So I might stumble myself along that conversation. I don't expect you to hold back in any way, Dwan. I know you too well for that. So we'll get through it together. But, I'm just a person and trying to figure this all out just like you guys.
Definitely. I think it's good for us to point that out, right? Like, I in no way could be wise enough to speak for all Black people or all Black men on any subject matter, right? And I don't want people to think that we've invited Paul on here to speak for all Jewish people at all. But we are going to, you will get my honest opinion and my honest thoughts. And, I'm sure that you'll get the same from Paul. And you're definitely going to get the same from Steve. So with that, man, we do have a list of questions that we want to walk through. But Steve, before that, do you want to talk about, kind of set the stage for anybody that hasn't seen or heard some of the stuff that's been said and the reason we're having this conversation?
Yeah, I think it probably makes sense to watch the snippet we have of Nick Cannon's comments, because I think that'll kind of give the most context, and then we can kind of bring DeSean stuff in a little bit later as we go. But I think that'll kind of set the stage, because I think there's enough. It was an hour and a half conversation, that Nick Cannon was having. The gentleman, you'll see him with his Professor Griff, who used to be a member of Public Enemy, the rap group, for those of you who are familiar. But he, he's got his own platform that he builds, and so you'll hear this is just a small portion of the conversation. If you want to see the whole thing, like I said, it is an hour and a half, but it definitely. This is a good snippet of it. But if you just Google Cannon's class, and if you Google Cannon's class, you'll see the hour and a half come up. It was taken down. Somebody else threw it up on another channel. They had got to it and recorded it ahead of time. And it's interesting. I have mixed thoughts about that too. If I'm Nick Cannon, I don't want it up. In some ways, and the stuff is. In some ways, I think it can be, I guess I have mixed feelings about that too. Because on the one hand, I think it can be a learning tool for people. But then I think that there's enough people, and as I've been watching some of the comments, even with Professor Griff and some of his lives, there's a lot of people who were really kind of connecting with the things being said on this as well. But that we can get into that later too, but I think it makes sense to jump into the clip and then use that as a springboard for the questions.
Sounds good. Ralph, you got something for us?
So let's go to what it really is then. When we talk about the power of melanated people, when we talk about who we really are as guys, and understanding that our melanin is so powerful and it connects us in a way that the reason why they fear black, the reason why they fear is because the lack that they have of it. So then when you see what Dr. Francis C. Welsing talked about is that fear in that
just genetic annihilation,
deficiency of when you have a person that has the lack of pigment, the lack of melanin, that they know that they will be annihilated. So therefore, however they got the power, they have the lack of compassion. That melanin comes with compassion. Melanin comes with soul. That we call it soul. We soul brothers and sisters. That's the melanin that connects us. So the people that don't have it are a little, and I'm gonna say this carefully, are a little less, and where the term actually comes from, because I'm bringing it all the way back around to Minister Farrakhan, to where they may not have the compassion or the when they were sent to the mountains of Caucasus, when they didn't have the power of the sun, that the sun then started to deteriorate them. So then they're acting out of fear, they're acting out of low self-esteem, they're acting out of a deficiency. So therefore, the only way that they can act is evil. The only way they have to rob, steal, rape, kill, and
fight or flight,
in order to survive.
Exactly.
So then these people who didn't have what we had, and when I say we, I speak of the melanated people.
Right.
They had to be savages. They had to be barbaric. Because they're in these Nordic mountains. They're in these rough, torrential environments. So they're acting as animals.
Right.
So they're the ones that are actually closer to animals. They're the ones that are actually the true savages. And then they built up such this I don't want to say warrior, but they built up such this conquering barbaric mentality that they're coming out of Europe. They then said, in order for us to survive, we have to take what's not ours. And then they went into the land that actually where we are originated. And instead of trying to make friends, they said, we want what you got. Because there's this mentality of whether it's the Caesars or even that we have to conquer.
Right.
So I say all that to say the context, and when we speak of whether it's Jewish people, white people, Europeans, the Illuminati, they were doing that as survival tactics to stay on this planet.
Right, because
we never had to do that.
Right, because they've learned when they circumnavigated the globe and they ran into these islands and these places, and we were already there to greet them.
Right. With open arms.
Teaching them, but they
were deficient.
They were deficient, so they wanted to get what they thought we had, and we did have it. So the rape took place of the woman. The theft took place of the natural resources.
And then that's when their disease,
exactly.
That's where their mentality, because I'm trying to get to that place of how they were able to get control over the gods. How are they able to get control over their
once they
original
learned that, though, and now they raped and impregnated, left and came back, and they saw the child lighter, they said, wow, that's when they learned genetics, genetic annihilation. So now you have to set up a system of white supremacy to control that.
Right.
So now we have 13 families here, Illuminati that's manipulating and controlling, subgroups. Now we got to set up organizations.
Coming out of Europe.
You understand what I'm saying? And for that same system, now you're talking about survival, what you just laid out. Now it's fight or flight. Now we have to set up these systems in order to survive. Right. But listen, not just survive to get some damn some hamburger buns and some cheese. I'm talking about on a genetic level.
On the genetic, because they will, and that's even from the white nationalists to the white supremacy mentalities to Donald Trump himself wanting to build walls.
Right.
They're trying to keep what they consider purity.
Exactly, on a subconscious
level. They're trying to stay alive.
Because sometimes they don't know why they acting out.
It's just been proven. National Geographic just put it out by 2050. Every person will be a person of color.
In a minute.
They saying that's as soon as 2050.
Right.
So that's a piece of it. He also talks about how black people are the true Jews in another piece. And that there's a lot of stuff. He names specific names. It talks about the Jewish power, not just in the U.S. but throughout the globe, and their goal of world domination. So I know he mixes a lot there with, between white people, white supremacy, Jews, and kind of seems to be coming in and out or just lumping it all together. I'd be curious, Paul, what your initial thoughts are.
So I guess anytime that somebody's having some hate, I'm not digging it. But it's interesting because when you talk about white supremacy and white anything, it was only 40, 50 years ago that Jews in America started to be called white, because we were segmented off as well. We had places that we were not allowed. We had memberships of clubs that we were not welcomed into, hospitals where our doctors couldn't serve. And so it's hard, to be lumped in with white supremacy is really confusing in my head.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm going to dive into a couple of the questions that we want to share. And we're going to go a couple different places with this, because I'm going to share some of my thoughts, and I hope Steve will as well. And I hope that if you're watching, you will join the conversation as well. Again, like Ralph, throw the number up, 313-473-0499. That's a way that you can actually join the show in real time. There'll be time to do that later on.
Please share too.
Yeah,
share the show.
Share.
Thank you, Minister Rhonda, for sharing the show. I see Leo out there. What's up, Leo? I know there's a bunch of other people on here. Thank you for being on here. Please comment. We wanted to see you guys engage with this. If you want to call in, like DeJuan said, but yeah, we want to connect with as many people as possible. So please share.
So let's start with some real basics, right? So Paul, can you explain to us the difference between what it means to be Jewish by faith or religion, and Jewish by blood lineage?
Yeah. So I mean, I'll just say that from the blood lineage side, that was what Hitler used to try to wipe out all the Jews. Right. He tried to make that. So that blood lineage gets me a little bit uncomfortable. I mean, we're a religion, right? And so on top of that, we have cultures, and we have, we've been a people for many years, 5,000 or whatever, right? So, but we are not. It is ultimately, when you're looking at it, 20% of the Jews in America are people of color. So when you bring that into it, it's hard to really tie things necessarily to lineage. When a person identifies as Jewish, they're Jewish, and it would be wrong for me to question them as a Jew. And so it really is about people that are choosing to follow a certain direction.
Thank you. So the next question we have is like, just can you share your thoughts for somebody that may not know and may not understand, right? Like, why was DeSean Jackson's and why was Nick Cannon's statements, like, why were they offensive from your perspective?
Yeah, so from DeSean, I gotta say, man, as soon as I see a swastika, as soon as I see a reference to Hitler, I mean, I don't even have to go any further than that. That hurts me, right? So my wife's grandmother was in Poland when World War II broke out. Her and she went to seek her husband and find her husband somewhere near Russia. The rest of that family was wiped out. So they're talking about like my wife almost didn't exist because somebody had hatred towards us. So even and I've tried to even read it what DeSean put and there's a lot there. So but even that, just the fact that he's quoting Hitler was enough for me. And then you take DeSean or Nick and you put them on how many followers do they have on social media and what impact are they making on people that don't have the information either. And so that's where we get to a place where it's hurtful. Anytime you see a swastika, I mean that it gets me, scared, frightened, right? Or angry on top of it. So
yeah.
Yeah.
So Steve, did you want to throw a question? Because I got them. I can keep firing away.
Keep going. Keep going.
Yeah. The next question. It looks like we got a couple from the audience. I'll throw the next one. Then we got one from Brian Ferguson Bay. It looks like Josh Spires has a comment. But do you think that there's a difference between someone talking from a place of ignorance versus being a place of hatred? And if so, like, share why or why not.
So yeah, I mean, a lot of people. I've said plenty of ignorant things in my life, right? And I don't think I was saying them out of a hateful place. So I mean, ignorance is something where people say things or what their environment has provided them that they think to be true, or that the information or their experience makes that true. And it's up for all of us to educate differently and to bring different information. So I talked about the magnitude in which Nick and DeSean are coming from. And there's some stuff that's come out of the White House in the last few years that is actually much more hateful, right? And it's not. I'm going to assume that it's not from a place of ignorance. That there is something intentional there. So there, from that space, I think there's definitely people. We all say things, and we can be better.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. I'll throw one of the questions from the comments. So Brian Ferguson Bay says, what specific thoughts from the clip did Nick Cannon give false information?
Yeah, from the clip I saw, I mean, you guys, I mean, you were watching the same clip. I was trying. I had the closed caption running across. I'm not a very good reader, so I was trying to keep up with him. In a lot of ways, it seemed like Nick, in other ways that Nick always is, right? Kind of getting into a conversation. But there was, there was a lot of, when you start, like I said earlier, when you start talking about white supremacy, and I know that later in the clip he mentions Jews and tries to tie that into it. I don't know anything. I have no knowledge of the 13 families or whatever else. I don't have any information to share one way or the other. And that it seems a little bit much for me.
What's interesting to me about this, and somebody just asked, so Juan just asked, My question is, why, when a black man speaks that truth, do white Jews get angry? My question is, which truth are we talking about here? So I think, and this is one of the criticisms I heard about it, is that there are some things, if we're just talking about white people in general, there are some pretty heinous things that white people have done to Africans, to Black Americans, and like, just, you cannot deny it and you cannot justify it. There's nothing that you could say to make it better in any way, shape, or form. I think what he's doing, what's interesting to me, is that what he's doing with, when he brings in science to it, is one thing. And then you could talk about, like, with the clip the part we didn't see, and I'd be interested, somebody had asked about that too, Paul, was the fact that, like, he talks about Black people being the true Israelites. And so I think that goes back to the first or second question that we asked, is like, what does it mean to be Jewish? And so that gets into the, like, they're the real Jews, is what he's saying. So I'm curious about what that would, like, how you would respond to that. When you start bringing in science, like, that was the same kind of stuff. He's referring to himself as a god, and other people and other Black people as gods as well. And what's interesting is those are some of the same tactics that the early colonizers used. So they identified God as English, to help them demean the people around them in ways that would allow their conscience to let them do stuff that was heinous. It would also, like, kind of sets up this ideology for a hierarchy of oppression. And so it's interesting. So when he talks about less melanated people lacking compassion, just scientifically, when he talks about less melanated people, being savages, being evil, doing all of this kind of stuff related to the fact that, like, they couldn't access the power of the sun. I look at that as, like, the same stuff that, like, early slaveholders did and early oppressors did in this country. And so, and that stuff is dangerous as hell. And then when linking it to a particular people group, as well, like the Jews, it's like, those are the things that, like, really stand out to me as being problematic. And then to hear, like, all of the support that he got for it, just kind of let me know, like, oh, this is and some of it I knew was there. It's just interesting to see, like, once somebody really comes out and gets a lot of attention, to see, like, all the support. It's just interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I would think if anything, the first Jews, if you're looking at geographically, were probably Iraqis. When you try to figure out the map, and so, I mean, definitely have a different look than what I might have right now. I'm with my ginger hair and my real pale skin, but I think so from that space, right? I mean, there's a lot there. There's a lot there to and you can grab a hold of a narrative and you can believe it, and it's that's where I'm going to step in and say, I'm not the most informed individual. I'm not going to argue that space. But I, so I'm a little bit ignorant there. There you go. Ignorance right there, DeSean. There's ignorance.
So I respect that. And I think, so here's one of the concerns that I have when we do this, right? I think when we have this conversation, we can quickly take a people and ascribe the actions of some folks from that group to everybody in that group. And as a Black person that hates when that's done to me, I think that there's also a temptation, like, to do that, right? And a lot of times I think that comes from lack of information or ignorance, or fear, or a bunch of different places. But I think, I've heard people make the argument in the case that, like, look, like, there were Jews that stood with, like, Black people during the civil rights movement and lost their lives. And that's a fact. But I think if we try to say that was all, like, Jewish people, then that's not a complete narrative, right? Like, that's not true. But I think that there's, like any other people group, you're gonna have some Jewish people that have done some stuff that was foul towards people, right? But to try to say that that's like all Jewish people, like that's not something I'm willing to embrace like, as truth on a personal level, right?
So I mean, when you think about it, I mean, like when I watch the news, right, and I'm watching TV, and you know, somebody does some horrific thing, and I cringe, right, if it's a Jewish person that did it, because now I got it, that's injuring me, right? So when Madoff did his silliness and the ugly, horrible behaviors of Jeffrey Epstein, I mean, I'm putting his name out there. Right? That's not somebody I want to be affiliated with, but it's what happens. And so there's a lot of people in the world that do bad things. And so, I think it's more about, do you judge somebody for who they are as a person, and not try to necessarily try to connect them to a group?
Yeah, and that's challenging, right? Because like that's not something that we practice, and that's not something that we see modeled oftentimes. So I got a couple questions, and we got some people going like crazy on the
I see that
comment sections. I definitely want to get to some of those. I would say, Josh, like I'm reluctant to talk about the Black Hebrew Israelite cult / religion, his words, not mine, innately offensive to Jewish people. Like, I'd love to have, like, if we're going to go there, I'd love to have somebody from that community talk about themselves and describe themselves, right? For us to do that without representation of somebody that identifies as a Black Hebrew Israelite, unless we have somebody on there that wants to jump in the comment section and speak to that a bit, then I'm more comfortable going there. But just like we wouldn't do that for our brothers and sisters from the Jewish community, we, out of respect, we want to have somebody that can represent that community on. We won't do that to anybody else or any other groups. So the question I have is, one, like, what are your thoughts on like the proper response from us towards Nick Cannon, towards DeSean Jackson? I think that we're always like looking to see like how the hammer's going to come down. What do we do? I saw a bunch of people come out and just like, like bash them. And for me, when I see certain things happen, I'm like, all right, like, depending on what it is, I'm like, okay, we need some consequences. But again, like, I'm not sure what those consequences. I'm still trying to figure out like what part of it is Nick Cannon like giving some facts mixed in with some other stuff that's doctrine from other places, and what part of it is offensive and whatnot. But can you speak a little bit to what you would like to see when somebody steps across the line and says something that, reminds you of like really, really like dark times and dangerous places?
So, I think it's about when people are spewing hate, right? And when hate starts being out there, we have to be careful of it. We have to be careful to acknowledge it, and there's so much energy going on about doing, bringing the good narratives to the table, and then we get distracted and we take a narrative that goes away. One of the things, and I talked about it a little bit, I mean, the part of the way I was raised, right, when it comes to about how Jews have been treated historically, and that we can go way back in history, is that, after the Holocaust, it was never again, right? And so I think you see people quickly
Talk about never again. Can you kind of explain that for our audience when you say, because you say never again, you just drop that in there and keep going, but explain the significance of never again in the Jewish community and how these type of comments might trigger like the spirit that's kind of behind that.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Because that's just like, that's what I was raised with, right? So I just say it and think and keep moving on. So after the Holocaust, 6 million Jews were exterminated, in addition to million African Americans and gay people and lots of other populations that gypsies, people that didn't fit into that Aryan ideal. And as the Jews were surviving after the Holocaust, the mantra that happened was that we will never let that happen again to our people. And so whenever there is anti-Semitism, whenever there is any movement of hatred towards the Jewish people, we're quick to jump in. We want to nip that in the bud. We want it to be acknowledged. And so with all this stuff that's going on, even the DeSean Jackson part, personally, I was like, I don't want to go down that path right now, because I think there's more important conversations that are happening in the United States and around the world right now. I don't want to lose the focus on some really good, important conversations that are happening. But at the same time, you can't let it go, and you want, it was great when I was reading the article from Kareem Abdul-Jabbar about it, right? So that was an ally. That was somebody that was stepping in and saying, look, we don't need to go to a place of hatred. We need to all be preaching this message of rights and equality and equity. Those are the important conversations that we're supposed to be having right now. We don't need to start bringing in this different narrative that starts moving towards hatred. So that's where never again, that's where that stands.
Because there's a real, so there's a connection between like the seeing Jews in a certain light, which is where Hitler was. Like Hitler moved with ideology, right? Planted this very divisive. He gave somebody to really like some like real hands, like, look, grab this. Like, this is the problem. This is why we are where we are, Germany, and this is how we, Germany, like the Aryans, get out of where we are. So we have to like deal with this problem, which is the Jewish people. And so that's the trigger, right? Like when you see stuff that like hints of that, smells like that ideology, like that's the stuff that's kind of been ingrained in Jewish families, right? It's like that's the never again, like it's an instant reminder.
So I had a conversation with my daughter last summer, and we were talking about it, and she was with a group of people, and the question was, are you a Jewish American or are you an American Jew? Right? My 15-year-old, this is my 15-year-old and I are having this conversation, and she struggled. She went back and forth both ways, and she gave an argument for both ways, and she said when it went around the room, she changed her mind several times. And when we were done with the conversation, I shared with her that I'm a Jewish American. And the reason why I identify as a Jewish American is there could be a point in our history that somebody may choose to decide that because I'm Jewish, I am not American, and that I am a reason for something bad that happens in America, or that our society decides that Jews don't have the rights anymore, because that's happened in our history many times. When in Germany, we weren't allowed to own land. It's the reason we did businesses and banks, because we weren't allowed to own land. So I'm always fearful. I had a friend of mine that said, when I told him I didn't have a passport, and he was like, how is it possible that a Jewish person doesn't have a passport? You never know when we might have to flee. And so that's a different perspective, right? And I've changed that narrative, and I've been American and strong and wanting to assimilate, and I can, right? I get to walk down the street, and I get to people assume I'm Irish, right? Whatever they want to assume. And I get that right. And I have that privilege as a result. But at the same point, when my son is on a hockey rink and he goes into the corner, when he's playing against a community that doesn't necessarily care about Jewish people, have a lot of hatred in some of those families, and they're saying, they're calling him names as they're checking in the corner. That's not where that belongs, right? So it's all over, and we just have to be protective of ourselves.
That's good. I'd like to try to tie something in, try to tie two things in together, right? So I think when we talk about, and I want to say Juan Jackson, Brian Ferguson Bay, I see y'all comments. I want y'all to know I'm acknowledging them. I feel this pressure of wanting to like go some of the places that you guys want to go and try to tie that in this conversation. But I say we might need to have another conversation for some of the points that you guys are raising. And you got my word that, like, if y'all want to, we'll do that. But when you say never again, and how that is something that is kind of maybe universally understood in the Jewish community, right? Like, I think that we're Black people, we're consistently looking for our like never again. Juan Jackson said something to the effect of like, I don't even know where I'm from, right? So like, there's always a constant search for like a connection for Black people in this nation. And depending on what you read, what you research, you might land somewhere totally different from someone else. What I've seen oftentimes is wherever you land, based on your research, you believe that to be the truth. I'm not going there right now. Where I am going to go is, I'll never again, sometimes it's so often connected to bondage and slavery, and anything that feels that way, like we want to do what you said and we want to nip it in the bud. So I think when we see a lot of like the power dynamics in the entertainment industry, be it like music or, a show like A Wild 'N Out, that being controlled at the top by people that are Jewish, I think that when somebody finds themselves in a deal that doesn't feel right, when they feel like they've been taken advantage of in some way, shape, or form, and they end up feeling like they're working for like slave wages, right? And it's hard for people to understand that when they see these people look like they're living really well or doing really well. But I mean, if you look across a bunch of different industries and see how people are taken, I think that sometimes that's what that response feels like. And then that's when you see the lumping of a whole people group because of some deals that they have with people that are Jewish, right?
So Dominique brings that up too, because some of this was in the context of music. Some of it was just a broad, like very far-reaching scope. But she talks about that. I think we need to frame the convo within the scope of music entertainment as a piece of that.
So I think that when you see when as a Black person, when I hear that type of response, I think my first point of reference is the Ice Cube song shortly after he broke up with NWA. You know what I mean? And he put that breakup on, I guess, the Jewish manager of NWA at the time. And I can't remember how I was at the time, but like, I was at a point where like I was like very impressionable, you know what I mean? And some of the conversations I would hear in the barbershop with the conscious Black folk, or different poetry settings that I would go to, had very like painted the Jewish community with a real broad brush. And if you couple that with the pain and the anger that I felt, realizing that the history that I was taught was incomplete, intentionally like wrong growing up, you couple that with somebody like giving me something that sounded good and felt good, like it was easy for me to embrace some of that. So I guess like seeing that there are a lot of people that are caught up in like bad deals. Part of me is like, look, like you negotiate your deal up front. You know what I'm saying? That's part of like who I am as a person. I'm like, look, like if I find myself entangled in a bad deal, like I'm like, part of me is like shame on me. You know what I mean? And I don't come from wealth. You know what I mean? But I assess and understand like my value when I'm negotiating a deal for myself. But like, what do we say to that? What do we say that, like, you know what? Part of this is Nick being in a bad deal or seeing his friends in bad deals and him wanting to say like never again, and it feeling like the power is in a specific people group, be it the Jewish community. And are we saying the same thing? And is there a dialogue that needs to take place along those lines?
So, yeah, I would hope for the Black community to be able to find a place for that, to find some peace there. That would be a wonderful thing for our country to be able to move forward. It's going to take a lot of work from a lot of people, and no way, I don't think you can realistically compare the plight, the whatever, the direction of the Jewish community and the Black community in our country. I mean, you can't compare them, right? I mean, even as we finished in the Holocaust and we got reparations, right? We were given, the survivors were given money for the horrible things that happened to our people, and that's never happened for the Black community, and that's unfortunate. I mean, that we need to do something to find that place for the community to allow us as a country to heal. So I wish we could define that right now for us, DeJuan, and really be able to point to that. And the two don't compare in that space at all. In regards to people making deals and people being wealthy people, I'm not from that space, so I haven't been fortunate enough to have all that wealth to be able to make those decisions. And there's a lot of people who have definitely done well from both sides and done poorly and been taken advantage of. And that's I don't know how to account to that. There is a lot of stuff. That I'm looking over at some of the comments, and there is a lot of stuff that's being said, and I appreciate you not taking us down that path, because I have no awareness of some of that. I have no way to comment to those things. It hasn't been something that I've ever been taught or ever been exposed to. So, there's some good conversations over there, but I don't think I'm part of that conversation in a meaningful way.
So, and I respect that, like, right, like not like looking to be an expert on something that you're not an expert on. And like I said to them, we are willing to have those conversations, but that's not what this is. This was about like, what does it look like for us to not play a part in like not giving ourselves a pass to offend a people group. I saw a conversation on social media today where like, who suffered the most, right? If I think about the most painful thing that I experienced on a really personal level, right? If I think about that, I'm not trying to find somebody else and compare my pain level to theirs. I just want them to be able to say, man, that was effed up. I want to be able to look at them and say, man, that was effed up. I wish that wouldn't have happened to you. You know what I mean? But I don't want to be like, yeah, mine was way more effed up than yours. You know what I mean? So, but that's the conversation that I saw taking place. And people start to bring like historical things into play. And you can tell that people like were well studied on this. And I think that going to something that you said earlier, Paul, like there's a conversation taking place right now. And if white supremacy isn't a big enough system for us to come together and fight, when we seem to be starting to unite and rally, like we don't need to be offending other folk and fighting other battles right now. Now, if we feel that way in our heart and we have some stuff that we need to deal with, look, we need to get that stuff out. But I think that for me, for one, like a lot of people have enough connections with people like from different people groups to be able to go somewhere and get in a safe space and say, yo, like I'm really ignorant on this. Can you help me grow? Right. But to jump on Twitter and just start saying some things like haphazardly, I think that we have to be careful to do when we're doing that. Like even some of the comments that I see in the chat, right? It's like the question I would have is like, have we had these conversations in silos? If you are somebody that's saying like talking about truth and true history, like have you had that in a diverse? Have you had those conversations in a diverse group, right? Or have you had them in silos with people that have shared the same pain as you and have shared the same experience as you, or come from the same background as you, and you guys, there's no checks and balances, right? Nobody's pushing back. And what I often tell people is that like, look, like we discredit history books with other history books, right? Because one is older than the other one, right? But there is some things that are just right and wrong. And me saying something that is a pain point for you and being okay and trying to figure out a way to give myself a pass because of some reason or another, like that's just wrong to me. You know what I mean? Like based on the way I see things. If I know it's a pain point for you, now if it's something that like we're talking about something that a person did, or if we're talking about something that's like very historically accurate and like we can definitely prove that, then we need to call things what they are. When you say that reparations are old, like I stand in agreement with you. We all know like that to be a fact. Now there are people that are worried that they're gonna have to write a check, you know what I mean, or whatnot. I'll just say to them, I pay taxes too. I probably pay more taxes than you have. You know what I mean? So like, but I'm not gonna sit there and say like, don't take my taxes to pay reparations. But anyway, if y'all watching, I love y'all. I love that y'all brave enough to come on here and say some of the stuff that you guys are saying in the comment section. I wish we could talk about this all night. I promise that we will go to some of those places that you guys are looking to go. Dominique, thanks for correcting me. She said Nick Cannon has a great deal worked out. He actually owns Wild 'N Out. I'm not going to, like, Dominique lives in that space and she knows a lot more than that than I do. So I'll trust that she's right for right now because I only have a few minutes. But I really fact check everybody. I think that, you know, even myself, I say some stuff, I go back and double check that I'm right. All right. Paul, do you want to leave with any last words? Steve,
so before Paul goes, I got a question for all the people that are very active. Is Nick good for this? Like, is this just okay? Because that's what it sounds like you guys are saying. Like, a lot of you, like, he's straight. So I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to understand that part, which ties into kind of what you had just said a minute ago, DeJuan. But yeah, go ahead. You had a question for Paul.
No, I was just saying if you guys had, we're running short on time. I thought for sure, like with the fire that's going on in the comment section.
Yeah, we can go a little bit.
Somebody would have jumped on, but it looks like Dawn and who's Dawn having a wrestling match with? Brian. Brian and Dawn having a wrestling match right now. I don't even know who I got my money on with that.
Wow. I don't know Brian, but I do know Dawn. So.
Oh yeah. Like yeah. It's not gonna be any light work on either side. Like, but you know, you got anything you want to leave folks with?
Yeah, I guess really, it is about having a conversation, right? And it's about putting things out there. It's about coming from the right place, and really trying to find a win for everybody. Having these conversations, being able to open that dialogue, trying to break down some of these preconceptions. It's healthy. It's healthy, and we all. I'm not gonna say we all. I need to grow more as a person, and so these conversations help me to grow more. I need to be on this and listening more. So I got to figure out how to check you guys out on other nights and really learn a little bit while we go. Yeah. So I appreciate you both for having me tonight.
So KV Anthony just said Nick doesn't own Wild 'N Out, which was the sense that I got from his comments. I'm not gonna lie, because he's demanding ownership, and if it's in the contract, you shouldn't need to demand anything. Like, it's just like, we'll just take care of this. I'm gonna go my way with this, and so yeah, I don't know where that I'd be curious to see how it plays out. I am curious, Paul. I know we're a little over time. What are your thoughts on the outcome for this, or what do you think the outcome should be? So Nick gets let go of Viacom. So what are your thoughts on that? He's talking about he's going to go to Israel. DeSean, I believe, is going to Auschwitz. And so I'm just curious, before we leave, what your thoughts are on that. And because we've brought up the cancel culture quite a bit. There's a lot we could unpack more, but I think trying to. So
I guess I always mess his name up. Julian Edelman, is that right? Did I get it right? Edelman, the Patriot.
Yeah, you got Edelman. You got the Edelman part right.
Yeah. So he reached out to DeSean and said, "Hey, let's go to Washington D.C. Let's go through the Holocaust Museum. Let's go through the African American Museum. Let's sit down and have a cheeseburger and talk this through." And I think that's the most powerful thing that anybody could do, is understanding somebody else's culture and understanding why people are sensitive to certain things. And so then you can make an informed decision, and you can make the statements that you make and feel comfortable that whatever happens, that you're comfortable with those outcomes. I don't really want to judge either of those guys. I don't want, or anybody else that's out there making those statements. I'll judge DeSean a little bit, but but beyond that, I'm not interested in really, I'm not going to pull that trigger for you, Steve. It's just not. I barely saw the Nick Cannon stuff till like till after DeSean sent me the, hey, do you want to do this thing? So there's a lot there. I did read something that Nick was really putting some big apologies out there. I'm glad. I hope that there's some learning that takes place. If you really want to open it up, I still angry with Mel Gibson. I can't watch his movies. So if you that one, I'm okay if you want to cancel him out, but beyond that, I think I think people are gonna make their own decisions, and nobody is going to agree with what's right.
What are your thoughts, DeSean?
I am somebody that is probably viewed. I think even people that appreciate my point of view on some subject matters are probably upset at me for how hopeful I am when it comes to stuff like that. Well, I am naively hopeful and probably gullible when it comes to being optimistic about change. There's many reasons for that, but I think when somebody offers an apology, I'm always like, okay, what next though, right? Like the apology is one thing, but like, is there some like change behavior that's going to take place? And what does that change behavior look like, right? I mean, even some of the people in our comment section are like, look, like there's no need for an apology. He just said was historically accurate. You know what I mean? It was true. You know what I mean? So I think for me, like I want to see what like moving forward looks like, because just canceling people Like, that doesn't work. Like, we would have to do away with America. You know what I'm saying?
Period.
Period.
Everybody.
You know what I mean? So like we're all jacked up. Like, we all learned a bunch of dumb stuff that we need to unlearn. We need one another to unlearn it, right? Like, there's some things that you'll know, Steve, you understand, things that you know, Paul, that you understand, things that I know. And without us coming together, like, we're just still like incomplete. And the faster we can get to the point where we say, you know what, like, I need you. You know what I mean? And that's a hard thing for me to, like, a realization for me to come to, right? But like, I understand that now. So like, I need you. And if we can get to that point, like we say, I'm messed up, right? Like me, and I need you. Then I think that we can get there a lot faster. So if that's what Nick is saying, if that's what DeSean is saying, like, I'm messed up and I need you, and folks are stepping up to be there for them, I know that they have something to offer. And I hope that they are not shell-shocked to the point where they won't deliver and freely give for fear that they're going to lose everything. I hope that they're not so shell-shocked where they won't offer what they have to those that are looking to come and embrace them and educate them. So that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Fox took a very different approach than Viacom, and they're new. You know, Viacom lets them go. Fox is like, hey, you know, we'll see. We'll let this. We think the apology seems genuine. We'll let this stuff kind of play out. And according to Nick, Viacom wasn't even open to a conversation. Like, he said he tried to reach out. They said he didn't. It seems like he probably did, based upon me kind of reading the dynamics and the body language, etc. He is supposed to go to Israel. It's a lot, and I'd be like, I'm assuming, you know, based upon that hour and a half video, that this isn't just like one of those mistakes that you make, that you just like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. But I think that even in the video, multiple times said, I need to be really careful how I say this, or, you know, just had kind of hinted at like where he was at. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff. Farrakhan is obviously a mentor for him to some degree, whether that's like in proximity or not, I don't know. But there's a lot of stuff that I'm like, this stuff is really, really deep. So I'll be very interested to see kind of like how he develops, because even the books he's reading and the things that he's ingesting on a consistent basis kind of all are pointing in the same direction. I am really, really curious to see what this will do. And, you know, what Paul, you had mentioned with DeSean Jackson and the partnership that allows him to have, and really being able to have, like, that's the gift of this, is opening up dialogue, opening up even this conversation that we're having right now, and to talk and to hopefully bring understanding. And I think the museum, like the Holocaust Museum, that's a phenomenal place to start to like get some appreciation for another perspective and another people group. And I think all of us could use a lot more of that in general. So I'm trying to be hopeful too, DeJuan. I think both of them, especially Nick Cannon, has some amazing ability to influence and really reach people. And, you know, you've seen people coming on both sides of the coin saying, like, really jumping at both of these guys. So we'll see. You know, it's an interesting conversation for America to have. And we didn't even get into like some of the stuff that's happened in Boston with some of these like white supremacist, like neo-Nazi groups, Paul. I mean, you guys are catching it from a lot of different ways. And it's just, it's a good conversation.
So we want to have you back at some point, Paul, to dive deeper. So I'll put some pressure on you and get you to give me a yes right now from everybody.
And then we'll bring somebody that actually knows something to the topic.
You were great, man. I mean, you were great. So
Brian actually put something out there, and I might have an answer. The word Israel means one who struggles with God. That's what the word Israel means. So That was if I don't know if that's the right answer you were looking for, Brian, but that was the one thing I learned in Hebrew school. So,
but he said, where did it come from? So I'm not sure if that's
if that's where he was coming from with that.
Now Brian's an educator, right? So he's part of a group called In Demand. Y'all check out In Demand, look them up. Dope group of brothers in the city led by Quan Nellums that are looking to recruit Black men into the education space, be it like, volunteers or like looking to teach and whatnot. And let's pray for our teachers, man. They're catching it right now. But Paul, thanks for the attempt at answering. Yeah. Brian, thanks for giving Paul the thanks. Thank y'all all for the activity in the comment section. We are. Is it no?
Thank you guys. Hey, if you could again share this, you got to be more specific. You got to lay out the question that you actually wanted to ask, because that's an answer. And like Juan followed up, like Jacob, his name was changed to Israel. But yeah, if you guys share this, that would be a great help to us. If you find value in this, we would. That would be meaningful to us. And we got more conversations you can check out on our YouTube channel as well. So thank you guys very much. Thank you again, Paul. Really blessed to have you on the show.
I appreciate you.
Ralph, take us home.
Yep.
This is America.
I have a dream.
These are animals.
America preaches integration and practices segregation.
Why did you say Mexico?
A rising tide of discontent.
The South will rise again. I have a dream.
We have contrasting visions about what America is.
This is America.